I do think FIFA and UEFA need to get in a room and sort out fixture calendars. I think it's actually a disgrace that they're at loggerheads together.
There will be days where it's going to be said Spurs could have done with Kane today.
I think they're a better team without Harry Kane. I really do.
Will they win the Champions League before they win the league?
That's actually that isn't impossible.
Have to finish on one of them, secure European football. You can't spend all that money and finish 10th. Because if they do, then Pochettino, he could lose his job.
Hello, welcome to High Press, brought to you by William Hill in partnership with the Football Writers Association. I'm Alison Bender, and each week we'll be discussing all the biggest football talking points with a rotating cast of Fleet Street's finest writers and broadcasters. So we've got some great fixtures to discuss this week, so we'll get straight into that with Carrie Brown from beIN Sport, Miguel Delaney from The Independent, and Roshane Thomas from The Athletic. Guys, welcome along. So let's start with Spurs against Chelsea, and Spurs just look revitalised under Ange Postecoglou. What do we reckon? Is this one Spurs to lose?
Absolutely. And who could imagine when, first of all, Pochettino was announced at Stamford Bridge, Harry Kane looked to be going out of the door, and Spurs fans were just looking at that date in the diary thinking, how awful is it going to be when he returns? And now we
don't even need to talk about Harry Kane anymore. I mean, they seem a better team without him. I mean, we'll get more into that. But this one, I mean, it's going to be a great derby, isn't it, Miguel?
Yeah, it should be. Especially, I mean, given the football Spurs obviously played. Now we're beginning to see Chelsea look more like a Pochettino team. And it should feed into maybe something like the Chelsea-Arsenal game and proper back and forth with the potential for a lot of goals. It's exciting.
Look, it could be the game of the season. On paper, it's exciting, and people refer to him as Chelsea. I refer to him as Clan FC with the amount of purchases they've made in the summer. But look, it should be an exciting game, and I think Pochettino will have a point to prove, because the reason why ultimately they parted ways with Tottenham was he wasn't given sufficient backing under Daniel Levy. And I got the backing at Chelsea. He's like, look, I'm here, I've been revitalised, and hopefully I can do well with Chelsea.
Postecoglou against Pochettino. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Two managers you know really well, Carrie. You've worked on so many occasions with both of them, and they're both great managers, aren't they?
I clearly have a soft spot for nurturing coaches. I came into this industry in the generation of the hairdryer and brilliant Alex Ferguson, which was wonderful. But when I saw what Pochettino was doing at Southampton and Tottenham, I did a documentary on him. And then I went and covered Postecoglou at 2 Asian Cups. First of all, getting to the final against Japan and Qatar, and then winning it in Australia against a lot of the expectations, to be honest. And the one thing they do and what they've done this season is elevate players and bring the belief. Get Rashford into one of those teams immediately. Because an example of what Postecoglou did at the Asian Cup in Australia, well, he believed in a player that played in Division 1 for Swindon. His name's Mas Luongo, is at Ipswich at the moment, maybe helping them to back-to-back promotions. But he went on not just to be good in the tournament, he went on to be player of the tournament, beating Son. And Mas Luongo was completely unheard of. The fact that he elevated him to a continental championship, to be the best player on the pitch that day and outclassed Son as player of the tournament is remarkable. And he did that player for player for player. If you look at Jedinak, who's on the coaching staff with him, who was a building contractor who got into football and elevated himself up. He never believed he'd even get as far with Australia, with Postecoglou. Already he was playing at Crystal Palace, of course, and a big leader on the pitch. But if you talk to them about what he does to players and makes them believe and break down brick walls, him, Ange and Mauricio are two in the same very much, and tactically really astute. And I do love the way that I think Ange is being very polite, but you can see him just measuring himself sometimes. There's a disbelief that an Australian will know so much about football. But yeah, he's a brilliant manager at bringing up players and giving them belief. And goodness, that's what Tottenham have needed.
You wouldn't dare call them bottlers or Spursy under Big Ange, would you? I mean, it's just, it looks like a completely different side.
Yeah, you certainly would. Kerry made fantastic points just now. And for me, you have to remember, when Postecoglou was appointed, it wasn't some sort of sexy appointment. They wasn't celebrating the streets of Tottenham. A lot of fans were like, really? Him? And look what he's done over the past however many months it's been. It's been great to see. And he's brought that winning mentality to Tottenham. Tottenham going to games and you're thinking, they're going to win. Whereas before it was the case, they'll be second best. And look, I know it's part of the question for later, but I think they're a better team without Harry Kane. I really do. They're centred around a team. They're no longer focused on one player. And I think Tottenham, most importantly, have learnt from the sell of Gareth Bale. Because if you remember when Gareth Bale was sold to Real Madrid, they wasted that money. Completely wasted it. The only good signing from memory was Christian Eriksen. All the other signings were terrible. I've been like, you know what? We made a mistake. will be much better this summer, recruit well. And for me, the sign of the season has been Mickey van der Van, the centre-back. He's been incredible. What a spot that is. Whoever spotted him should get a pay rise. That's how he's been playing. So hopefully Tottenham can keep up because they've been doing really good.
So let's get into that now. Spurs without Harry Kane. It almost reminds me of Chelsea when Eden Hazard left and suddenly the rest of the team stepped up in a way that we didn't have to talk about Hazard anymore. I think Son is better. I think Anne just said quite publicly it gives us a different option and goals are coming from all over the place now.
Well, I think regardless of anything, Spurs, they had to get to a point where they had to think about a future without Harry Kane, be that because he left or just because age or retirement. So in some cases it was almost better to take the band-aid off. As predictable as he was in terms of scoring if he got the chance, it did make Spurs themselves more predictable. There will be days where it's going to be said Spurs could have done with Kane today, but overall they needed a new outlook, they needed a freshness, and both the departure and Postecoglou himself, I think much more than the departure, have brought that.
They are a good team now. They have Postecoglou. They are a good team. They've recruited well to cover Harry Kane. But if Harry Kane was there now, they would have top 4 favourites, title contenders. They've had to actually spend the money under Daniel Levy to compensate for him. And if he'd spent that and kept Kane and brought in a manager with Postecoglou's tactics, what an exciting team that would be.
I mean, speaking about world-class strikers in Harry Kane, boy, could Chelsea do with one of those. And, I think Chelsea are struggling in the striking position. Nicholas Jackson is doing the business, but not to the extent that Chelsea need, I think. But a game like this, a game against Spurs, as we saw like with the game against Arsenal, is just going to be sort of like almost forms out the window, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Pochettino's system is obviously better with a focal point. It seems an obvious thing to say. I think we could do with a world-class number 9. But it wouldn't be such an issue if the rest of the team was more developed, if Pochettino had been at the club longer. But as it is, he's basically kind of trying to bring along a new team throughout. So in that context, he could do it. I mean, you can already see the difference when Broke is in the team. And Jackson, he's someone that I think there's a lot of potential there, but that's what it is for now, potential. And
where are you building from? Like that, often when a new manager comes in, they will see a key player and they will build that team around that player. But what player are you building Chelsea around? There isn't any obvious player that's a standout starter, is there?
There is an argument, of course, that actually in the longer term suits Pochettino, because I mean he bristles a bit at this when he's asked, and I actually asked him in his opening press conference when he sat down with the kind of written press afterwards about kind of how he prefers to work with young players. And he goes, well, you do need some balance, which is true, but equally because so much of Pochettino's approach requires hard running, and you'll get more of that from younger players who haven't worked with other managers, who don't kind of question things. They'll follow what the top man does, and I think that we're going to start seeing the benefit of that really. We probably already are, but yes, as they're evolving, they clearly look better with a focal point.
I actually want to make an earlier point about Jackson because I believe he'll come good.
Yeah.
He was really good for me in pre-season, which showed a lot of glimpses of his talent. Look, we're talking about Chelsea not having a focal point up front, but Cole Palmer's come good recently. He's played really good. I know when he's joined, a lot of fans are like, that's a lot of money. Yeah. But because I know his agent, and I was always telling the agent he needs to get a move. Like, he can't stay at Man City any longer. He's good. And we're seeing him play well now. Raheem Sterling, I know, been a bit inconsistent, but he's come good also lately. So it's all coming together a little bit for Pochettino, I think.
This Cole Palmer sort of revival, would you put that down to Pochettino, do you think?
Yeah, I believe so. As Carrie touched on earlier, he's good at working with young players. And I think he'll be a good signing coming in the season.
So one good thing, I suppose, for Chelsea is, they're not in Europe this season, but it at least allows them to build with this brand new team with so many different players. Chelsea haven't been out of Europe since 16-17 season and this season, but how quickly can they get back to Europe? I mean, Pochettino says next season we have enough quality to be back in Europe next season. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I do. And actually not being in Europe will help. I mean, remember the last time they went in Europe, they won the title. Now, that's not going to happen this year, clearly. But
excuse me?
Maybe they give themselves too much to do.
Yeah, agreed.
But that came because, I mean, you had a very much a training ground manager like Conte, who suddenly had all this space during the week to do with them. And let's not forget, they started that season badly as well. And it was only because he had the time to work in the training ground that he put them into a complete new system they just fitted.
Do you think they can finish in Europe this season, Chelsea?
I mean, I think they can still. Right. Well, there's a bit of a gap. I still think they can think about Champions League.
And there's so much competition now, because it used to be, I don't know, 4 or 5 and then 6, and now it's about 8 or 9. And Pochettino has admitted that, but still says that he feels that it's achievable.
Oh, certainly. Whether it's a Champions League, Europa League, or Conference League, we have to finish in one of them. Have to finish in one of them, secure European football. You can't spend all that money and finish 10th. Because if they do, then Pochettino, he could lose his job. Whether it's the Champions League, I think that's probably a bit too above Chelsea this season, but certainly the Europa League, they can finish it for sure.
So let's get on to another big fixture, which is Newcastle against Arsenal. 2 really great managers, 2 exceptional squads this season as well. 2 teams, again, who you could call them title contenders, definite European contenders. And Eddie Howe has done a really good job with Newcastle, but you just wonder how long we're going to see him at the club.
Well, I mean, I suppose the expectation is always going to be, and because it's impossible not to have the parallels with Manchester City a decade ago, given the takeovers and the nature of the clubs in that sense, that there, and especially as Newcastle are trying to rise up through the stages, they try and improve at every step until they're at that absolute elite level. And I suppose the big question is whether Howe himself can rise to that level. Maybe he can. People talk about how his individual coaching in terms of making players understand the role in the system is really good. So it's not a given that I think they eventually upgrade. If Howe keeps meeting his targets, then he'll stay basically, because it is still a relatively small squad. Even though they have spent money. Let's not overlook as well since the takeover. I think it's over 400 million. But it's still a small squad relative to rivals, and that could affect them as the season goes on.
Yeah, I do think with Newcastle, Eddie Howe is owed a huge amount of credit, and I think they've got quite a good feel-good story there. A manager when everyone expected them to go and spend big, getting a Rafa, which they couldn't get at the time, then going for Eddie Howe, who was never given the credit at Bournemouth because it had failed at Burnley, and that had been the big, can he do it at the big time? And then actually, when he gets that chance, it's Trippier that shows faith in him because of Burnley. And then you have the PSG match when the stars aren't available, the players from the roots of Newcastle show up on the big occasion to outclass the likes of Mbappe. And I think, I wasn't happy with the Newcastle takeover. I don't like that element of the story at all. I'm sorry, Newcastle fans, already. That's nothing new. But getting the Eddie Howe appointment right, sticking with him, believing in the results, it's a feel-good element that Newcastle United shouldn't throw away too quickly.
Is Eddie Howe the right man? I think he is. I really think he is. He deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. I have to admit, when he appointed him, I wasn't quite sure. But Eddie Howe, are you sure? But I look at Eddie Howe, and I think he's just great at developing players. Jacob Murphy, for example, Elliot Anderson, Joe Linton, converting him into a midfielder, how he's getting the best out of Callum Wilson. He's just so good at coaching, and it's not always about spending lots of money on players, a 30 million striker. You can't always sign a 30 million striker, but if you can improve someone like Elisak or Callum Wilson, that's brilliant coaching, and that's what Eddie Howe does.
So we've already talked about the depth of squads and how important it could be to have a season away from Europe. What do you reckon about Arsenal? They really need the Premier League more than anything, don't they? More than the Champions League. Wouldn't it be better for them to get knocked out of the Champions League and just put their sole focus on the league?
No, I believe it'll be beneficial for Arsenal to still be in the Champions League, because if you think back to last season when they were involved in the title race in Man City, they lost to Sporting Lisbon. I believe it was the last 16 of the Europa League on penalties, and that just could tell their form. It really did. I believe in that match, William Saliba was also injured, so it just completely derailed Arsenal's title bid then. And for me, Arteta will fully intend on Arsenal still being in the Champions League. And you have to remember, Arsenal fans have been without Champions League for quite some time.
Yeah.
So they're going to want to relish that and be in the competition as well.
I guess it gives you that spark, and if you've got young, fit players, it shouldn't be detrimental to be in European competition as well as the league.
I also think Arteta has a much bigger squad this year, and it's Wednesday night, not Thursday night. I think it's much easier to deal with. I think it gives him an opportunity to rotate and bring in his squad and keep them happier. And the one criticism of Arteta, which is hard because he was trying to bring in new systems, and that's always difficult, is he didn't give enough playing time to his bench to really build up their belief when they came on. He was just playing everyone out till the last minute and then bringing on cameos for 3 minutes. No player's going to have a confidence to come on and play there. The bigger squad, it gives him an opportunity to sort of maybe play through players that aren't getting regular goes in the Premier League. I still think try and get your top 4 automatically, but I think they've got to take their chance. Also, big Champions League nights. This is
players
special.
Love that. That's their bread and butter. That's what they dream about, isn't it?
Oh yeah, completely. And look, let's not be fair. I mean, we're in a position now where, just by virtue of being one of the English qualifiers, because the Premier League is at such a point of financial power compared to the rest of Europe, they're contenders for it. I mean, there's not that much sphere in Europe.
Will they win the Champions League before they win the league?
I mean, that's actually that isn't impossible.
Yeah.
It'd be given that, obviously, I mean, you'd say if everything goes normally with the league, City are probably the default favourites now and will be expected to win it. Whereas, as we've seen from countless Champions League seasons with Guardiola, sometimes you can just have an off night. And yeah, it's not impossible that Arsenal win that before they win the Premier League. But I think the most important thing is with all of this is that I mean, Carrie's going to reference it there, but there was maybe that slight sense last season that while Arsenal, they started brilliantly and the first 11 was clearly, it worked superbly. It was potentially not quite a flash in the pan, but they maybe overperformed. But then B, I suppose, there was that I think there was all this talk of how they bottled it or how they should have won the league. I think they basically got more points than they should have. But that was because the first 11 worked so well, but it put Arteta in a bit of a bind towards the end of the season, in that he could either keep playing the first 11 and see them be fatigued, which is kind of what happened, or else he could change it and lose what made them so good. So that was where one of the struggles arose. And I think one of the really impressive things about this summer has been he's tried to solve these issues with some of the signings. I think Havertz fits into that, and Havertz was key to that win over Man City, that long-awaited win over Man City.
And Declan Rice, I mean, you know all about Declan, but what an addition he's been to that Arsenal side.
Fantastic end. A lot of West Ham fans do how talented Declan Rice was, but the general public are like, I'm not so sure. Whereas now he's more than justified at 105 mil. I remember one press conference, David Moyes said Arsenal got him in the cheap. It should have cost more. And I'm happy for him because for me, I think he's one of the best midfielders in the league. But I often felt the next level for Declan Rice to add goals to his game. So after the match against Chelsea, the 2-2 draw, he said he watched the David Beckham documentary, and the reason why he shot from distance because he remembered Beckham's chip against Wimbledon. And he's like, I can do it too, I can take it on. Where Declan Rice evolved probably wouldn't have done that. So he's grown in confidence, he's such a leader, it's so much part to his game that a lot of people don't see.
Do you think he's more important than Kai Havertz for the team?
Yeah.
All in agreement there?
I mean, basically Havertz has been signed to give them variety, which means he won't always start. Rice has been signed to fit a specific hole. And I mean, okay, I'm not going to say Rice is the equivalent of Van Dijk. They're different positions for a start. But I think it's a possible, in the same way that Jurgen Klopp, he basically put the team together and had that one hole and he was willing to go big on it. And I think that's what Arteta's done with Rice. So hence they're similar in that way.
He was a missing piece of the jigsaw for Arsenal.
Yeah.
He really was. That's why I believe they can go one better this season and win the league.
Yeah.
I really do.
Still think they may need a striker though.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not convinced of Gabriel Jesus or Ketty, unfortunately.
Just extra goals, yeah.
So let's switch our attention now to top 4 contenders. There seem to be so many in the mix now. And I want to talk about Aston Villa because I think Unai Emery has completely transformed this team. When he took over, they were 16th, just a point above the relegation zone. Now they are absolutely flying. And I also want to talk about Liverpool and whether you see them more as title contenders or top 4 contenders. Let's start with you, Roshane. How impressed have you been with Aston Villa? Obviously, demolished your West Ham side, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, demolished West Ham the other week, and I thought Ollie Watkins was incredible. He really was incredible. He's elevated his game under Unai Emery. And when I think about this team, my main takeaway was they're so well drilled. So well drilled. Every man knew their role. And Ollie Watkins, obviously the main man, of course. And I believe through Aston Villa's performance so far this season, they are genuine top 4 contenders. I really do. I came away with it. It was so impressive how they performed, just completely blitzed West Ham. In terms of Liverpool, they're up there. They're certainly title contenders. And I probably believe Liverpool's sort of gone on the radar. I don't think anyone's giving them the respect they deserve. Their midfield's improved following the loss of Jordan Henderson and Fabinho, of course. I believe that was Asian midfield, so they had to bring in younger legs, fresh legs. And yeah, I think they'll be thereabouts coming in the season, Liverpool, for sure.
What do you think that Unai Emery has done that has really transformed this team? I mean, he's done so much. We know that he's tightened up the defence. We know that the set-piece specialist that he uses, Austin McFay, has made a real difference to things. We know that the attack and Ollie Watkins has improved as well, and John McGinn. But is there something about him as a person, as a coach, that you can see has really, really helped this Aston Villa side at the right time?
He's made the identity very clear. It's very clear. It's they all attack as a unit, defend as a unit. And I think the most important thing is returning players to their position of strength. You've got Ollie Watkins, Matty Cash just excelling in their roles now. They're where they want to be. I also just think what he's given them in terms of that direction and belief. Ollie Watkins talking very clearly about how he knows his identity and the chemistry. Diaby's been a really good signing as well, though, and they've got beautiful chemistry on the pitch, so that's also been a bonus for the team. But I just think you can tell that there's a real excitement playing so high up the pitch, which is even remarkable for him as a manager. But I think they've had a lot of change of manager. They've a lot of change of systems. He's kept it really simple, not stupid simple, because the work rate on the pitch, I think it's always been, and what's really nice to see is players like John McGinn. Every time I go to a Villa game, he's always absolutely outstanding. And then
and the fans love him
it's
so
just so
much,
good. But the
don't
rest of the team have raised their level to him. Yeah. He's always outstanding. And every time I go to a Villa game, sorry Villa fans, I always think, why doesn't a bigger club get him? Now it's a bigger club.
Yeah,
they've all raised to that level. Every time I used to go and see him, I just think, you should go to a bigger club. It's just so good. And now I think they've all raised to his level.
I mean, Villa Park is such a historic, it's one of my favourite stadiums, actually, Miguel. I love going there. And actually, of recent times, the football hasn't necessarily matched the kind of the history of the club. Now it's starting to do so. And Unai Emery, we've seen what he's done in cup games, but can he bring Champions League football to Villa Park as soon as next season? I mean, how quickly do you think he can do that, given what you've seen?
I think if he does it, it will be massive outperformance, and why I think still maybe a little bit unexpected. And for the same reasons we spoke about Newcastle potentially feeling the effect of Champions League football, you would think at some point, with the depth of Villa squad, they maybe feel the effect of European football there. The way I would see it, I suppose, is I think there's 3 positions in the Champions League next season. Well, actually, let's not forget, with the new coefficients rule and the expansion of Champions League, it's going to be 5 clubs. I think 3 are virtually certain. Man City, obviously, Arsenal, and I would go Liverpool. And then after that, there's what could be a pretty open fight for top 2. I think Villa can certainly look at it. I mean, this is it. Like you kind of look everywhere, and there's a lot of pluses and minuses. But
you've got half a chance.
Yeah, they can aim for it. I think that's what we can say. I think they'll have done very well to get that far. It will be overperformance by Emery. It'll be ahead of schedule, but they can certainly look at it. Yeah.
So what about Liverpool then? Where do we see this Liverpool side? I mean, you think probably third.
I think Liverpool
within the top 3.
I think Liverpool should be thinking about challenging for the title.
Yeah.
And I think Klopp realises that. There's already a lot of talk that, not to say that City will falter, but at the least, because they've won 3 in a row, because they won a treble, there's maybe that sense that, it's not that it brings complacency, but it just does cause a bit of a subconscious mental drop-off that at least makes them more vulnerable. Now, they could respond incredibly, as we've already seen how they beat Brighton. But there's a sense, I think, among Liverpool and Arsenal that there's a chance this season again. And it's why I think, actually, from what I've heard, both will seek to strengthen in January, purely about it because they see this as one of those seasons where the title might be on.
Where do you think they have to improve in January, Liverpool, potentially?
So it maybe a little bit more depth.
Okay.
You'd think, maybe at the back, actually. But I mean, the big one they're all talking about is Andre from Fluminense, the midfielder, who Arsenal have also looked at. Although Arsenal, the big one they want is actually a full back. But I think we've already discussed about how maybe they just need those extra goals as well.
I often think we talk about Jurgen Klopp is one of those managers who talks about it a lot, that his players being tired and the fixture congestion. But I think if you get young and hungry players, they shouldn't be as worn out, as tired from fixture congestion as sometimes managers make out.
I do think FIFA and UEFA need to get in a room and sort out fixture calendars. I think it's actually a disgrace that they're at loggerheads together. I do think it will come down to player welfare. Also, then clubs announcing tours and asking for the FA Cup replays to be scrapped, which I think is unforgivable. It can be a bit club versus, but I think they've all got to get around a room. There's just no need for some of the slip-ups to be there, and you can then get quality football. And we're getting to the end of the season when you haven't got the likes of Kevin De Bruyne at the end of it or at the start of it. I think it's a real shame when you're missing top players that just have been worn ragged.
I have a question. Am I a bit harsh in thinking, right? Footballers should just deal with it. Like, if it comes to the job, you have to play these amount of games.
But it's, I suppose the issue isn't that whether to deal with it. The issue is, do we want the highest quality possible? So that I mean, rather than players that just gotta, and also let's not forget we're in an era now where, due to sports science, they can track, all sorts of drop offs when players are going to close to a red zone, which I suppose makes it more needless. And it fits into something where, and this is a massive problem with modern football, where because there's all sorts of kind of conflicts and tensions between various federations, not least UEFA and FIFA, but then also Premier League with the rest, the only solution to anything always seems, well, we'll put on more games, we'll make it bigger. And we're seeing it, we already mentioned it with the Champions League, even though for this season domestically it could end up servicing one of the clubs because there's a fifth spot.
We want to see the best possible spectacle. So maybe squads need to be bigger. Maybe they need to start making squads bigger, more substitutions like we saw during COVID.
That actually opens up another issue, which is the bigger squads are, the more it favours the wealthier clubs.
That is very true.
And
I don't want to start that. I don't want to start that debate.
Although ironically, the biggest managers, or some of the biggest managers, hate the biggest squads. So Pep, most importantly, but Poch as well is not a big fan of big squads.
Potter had a terrible time, didn't he? Well, he couldn't fit all his players in one dressing room, which is.
But the only, I suppose, it's the impetus of big clubs, though, in that sense, and that if the opportunity is there to sign more, they'll just go for more talent from lower teams, and it affects the competitive balance.
Guys, I think we're going to leave it there because I definitely don't want to be changing football any more than it's already been changed. Thanks so much for your debates and discussions today. This has been High Press, brought to you by William Hill in partnership with the Football Writers Association. Don't forget, this is a weekly show, so if you like what you've heard today, then make sure you subscribe. I'm Alison Bender. I'll be back next week. 18+, please gamble responsibly.